ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੀ ਰਾਜਧਾਨੀ ਕੈਨਬਰਾ ਸਥਿਤ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਗ੍ਰੇਟ ਸੰਸਦੀ ਹਾਲ ਵਿੱਚ 1984 ਦੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨਸਲਕੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਮਾਗਮ ਕਰਵਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ। ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਲਿਖੇ ਗਏ ਇਸ ਸਮਾਗਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁਲਕ ਭਰ ਦੀਆਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਸੰਸਥਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸੰਸਦ ਦੇ ਮੈਂਬਰਾਂ, ਰਾਜਸੀ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਮੁਖੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਪਤਵੰਤਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਮੂਲੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ। ਬੁਲਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ 1984 ਦੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਤਲੇਆਮ ਦੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਮਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਕਰੀ ਸਦੀਵੀ ਯਾਦ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ 40 ਸਾਲ ਬੀਤ ਜਾਣ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਪੀੜਤ ਧਿਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਕੋਈ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਿਆ। UN ਗਲੋਬਲ ਸਟੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਦੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਇਕਤਦਾਰ ਚੀਮਾ ਨੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਭਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਏ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਨਸਲ ਘਾਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਤਲੇਆਮ ਨਾਲ ਮੇਲ ਖਾਂਦੇ ਵਰਤਾਰਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਰੱਖੇ। ਸਿੱਖ ਫੈਡਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਤੋਂ ਮਨਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਵਿਦੇਸ਼ੀ ਵਸਦੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਖਲਅੰਦਾਜ਼ੀ ਕਾਰਨ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਚੁਣੌਤੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਅਤੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਮਾਮਲਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਰਪੱਖਤਾ ਵਾਲੇ ਪੱਖ ਤੇ ਕਾਇਮ ਰਹਿਣ ਦੀ ਅਪੀਲ ਕੀਤੀ। ਇਸ ਮੌਕੇ ਖੇਤਰੀ ਕੁਈਨਜ਼ਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਉੱਘੇ ਸਿਆਸੀ ਆਗੂ ਤੇ ਸੰਸਦ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਬੋਬ ਕੇਟਰ, ਪੱਛਮੀ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਸੈਨੇਟ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ, ਗ੍ਰੀਨਜ਼ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਆਗੂ ਮਹਿਰੀਨ ਫਾਰੂਕੀ, ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਸੈਨੇਟਰ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਸੁਬਰੀਜ਼, ਸੰਸਦ ਦੀ ਡਿਪਟੀ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਸ਼ੈਰਨ ਕਲੇਡਨ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਨਸਲਕੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੇ ਕੌਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਚਿਰਸਥਾਈ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਜਿਹੇ ਵਰਤਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਰ ਹਾਲ ਠੱਲਣ ਲਈ ਯਤਨਸ਼ੀਲ ਰਹਿਣ ਤੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
So I encourage you all to approach today's discussion and what we hear from the speakers with an open mind. While limited information and resources once restricted our understanding of what took place, we now have more access to information than ever before to evaluate what truly happened day by day. The violence that erupted against Sikhs in November 1984 was not a series of random attacks. It was an orchestrated attack marked by shocking brutality, not only in Delhi, but across India. And the wounds of the attack exist today. October 31st, 1984, India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi is assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards in response to Operation Blue Star, a military action carried out earlier in the year. At 11 a.m, All India Radio announced that she'd been attacked by Sikh bodyguards and was taken to AIMS Hospital. Crowds begin gathering outside the hospital. And at 2 p.m, her death is officially announced. Anti-Sikh slogans, like blood for blood, echoed in the streets of Delhi. At 5:30 p.m, then Indian President Zail Singh, a Sikh, is travelling to the hospital and his car is stoned by the mob gathered outside. It is on this day, October 31st, that the first Sikh is killed on the streets surrounding the hospital. As reported in Economic and Political Weekly in December 1984, the Delhi violence was well planned and well organised. It would have burst forth even if Indira Gandhi had been alive. Reports that have since emerged suggest that the violence had been premeditated, potentially timed to coincide with Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpurb on November 8th. The assassination only triggered what was already planned for later in the month.
But all parliamentary colleagues that are here. But why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because those thousands of lives, thousands of Sikh lives that were lost 40 years ago must not be forgotten. We're doing this because the truth matters. And if we want to prevent genocide, and surely that should be above politics, surely every political representative should join with us in this task. We need to tell the truth about the past, and when genocide has happened, to name it for what it is. And the Sikh genocide that commenced 40 years ago, that took thousands of Sikh lives, needs to be acknowledged as such. And we know that the Sikh community in India and around the world is facing genuine repression. We've seen Sikh leaders in countries not dissimilar to this, Canada, being assassinated for being representatives of the Sikh community. And I know that the Sikh community is politically diverse, like all other communities. But we should be clear that the assassination was because of his Sikh identity and an attempted assassination in the United States. And we know that the BJP administration was behind both of those because the United States and Canadian authorities have said as much, and indeed the United States has commenced prosecutions. And I know because I've been speaking with many of you in the some now 12 months that's happened since that. And I know how that sense of threat and anxiety has reached into Australia as well. And again, I say, as I came into this room and saw you gathering here in the heart of our democracy, I had this sort of goosebumps that the Sikh community is staying strong and the Sikh community is standing proud and the Sikh community will not be silenced. And I can commend you for the strength that you've shown in being here.
Your minister has given her age, I want to give it too. I was born in 1980, so people would say you was just 4-year-old when this genocide was committed. How have you witnessed it? My dear fellows, I want to tell you it was 1984 when it was started. It did not end in 1984. I'm talking about 1995. When I was 15-year-old, my family used to live in Lahore, which is a neighboring city of Indian Punjab. And those days during the monsoon season, there used to come the floods in the river Ravi. And with these eyes I have seen many of the young Sikh youths tortured and dumped disceremoniously in the river Ravi. And the floods not only brought water from India, but the dead bodies of the tortured Sikh youth. Nobody was there to cremate them. I have never seen such an atrocity against humanity, which I have seen with my eyes. And I will never forget that, and that stays with me. That's the trauma of my life. Hence, despite being a Muslim who was born on the other side of the border, I have this passion to work, to advocate, and to talk about the Sikh genocide. So this narrative should change that it was 1984. It started in 1984. This was a decade-long genocide, which still continues in the shape of transnational repression, in the assassination of those who advocate for the Sikh rights. I will go to my presentation. So I would try to map what is genocide and how, by looking at the UN convents, we map the Sikh genocide. So genocide, as many of you would know, was coined by Raphael Lemkin in the days of Holocaust, which is from two words, geno and side, race and killing. Killing of a race is called genocide. Now, I have tried to tell people the Sikhs are not only a religion, but they are a race too, because most of you come from Punjab, so you share the race as well. Now, when we look at the UN convents about the genocide and prevention of it, the Article 2 of the UN Convention clarifies what is a genocide. So it says genocide is any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such by killing members of the group, causing seriously bodily harms, inflicting on group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction, imposing measure intended to prevent birth within that group, or forcibly transforming children of group to another group. Now, looking at this definition of genocide, this is the textbook definition of the Sikh genocide. Many people have been misphrasing it. People have been saying this was rioting. Somebody was saying this was violence against Sikh. Even my first presentation, which I really applaud, was a wonderful effort, says anti-Sikh violence. When you look at international context and in the context of genocide, every word has different meaning. Every word you associate with this have different implications when it comes to foreign policy or holding people to accountability. In the international structures, we have atrocity crimes, we have crimes against humanity, and we have genocide. But looking at this convention's very simple definition of genocide, it was indeed genocide. And every Sikh in the world should refer it as genocide, not as pogrom, not as anti-Sikh rioting or anti-Sikh program.
And ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ, the pain that the Sikh community went through, the killing, the maiming, the violence, the displacement. And it is shameful that that hasn't been acknowledged and recognized. So I do want to pay my tribute and honor people who faced that violence in those years. But I also want to put on the table, as Dr. Chima has said, that vilification, that harassment, and that violence continues on to this day. In India, but also we have seen how that harassment continues on in other countries where the Sikh community lives as well. And it's absolutely true to say that there can be no peace without justice, and that we should be doing all we can to ensure that justice should be done for the Sikh community and for every other community around the world who is facing vilification, racism, and harassment and violence.
To understand that how India actually operates. The silencing of dissenting voices, any legitimate form of dissent, is met with absolute violence in many different forms. The Sikh coalition quotes from October 31st to November 3rd, 1984, thousands of Sikhs throughout India were hunted and murdered by mobs following the assassination of Indira Gandhi. The government of India and then ruling party unleashed this campaign of premeditated, organized violence, including killings, sexual and gender-based violence, torture, the desecration and destruction of gurdwaras and libraries, and the destruction of Sikh homes and businesses, with the goal of eliminating Sikhs from Delhi and other cities throughout India. As Dr. Chima has already laid out, the stages of a genocide, to kill or to destroy fully or in part an entire nation of people, all of these quotes from 1984 and beyond will justify when Sikhs say that this was a genocide. This was not a riot. This wasn't something that happened spontaneously. This was premeditated and orchestrated and then executed by the Indian state, whether or not Mrs. Gandhi would have been assassinated or not. This was going to take place anyways, post-June of 1984, and the mass atrocities that happened at Darbar Sahib in Amritsar. When we say that the events of 1984 are not isolated, they're not to be taken in a silo, they're not to be taken as a one-off. The continuation of all of that genocide is before us today. I'd like to point something out to you here, because we often put our allegiance and our faith in institutions and organizations that maybe don't have our best interests at heart. The United Nations is often seen as an international force where justice will be delivered. This has proven to be problematic on many instances, especially for those engaged in struggles of sovereignty and existence. Genocide prevention and the responsibility to protect is an entire UN office. Following the atrocities committed in the 1990s in the Balkans, which the international community failed to prevent, the international community engaged in a conversation as to how they could do better in the future. I'd like to read you a couple of quotes from Kofi Annan at the time, who was the Secretary General of the UN. In September of 1999, while presenting his annual report at the UN General Assembly, Kofi Annan reflected on the prospects for human security and intervention in the next century, and challenged member states to find common ground in upholding the principles of the Charter and acting in defense of common humanity. I quote, he repeated the challenge in his 2000 Millennium Report. If humanitarian intervention is indeed an unacceptable assault on the sovereignty of a nation, how then should we respond to a Rwanda or other, to the gross and systematic violation of human rights that offend every precept of our common humanity? The question of territorial integrity and a nation's sovereignty will undermine the ability of the United Nations time and time again to act swiftly and accordingly to protect the interests of those that are being engaged in genocide by states and often their own state. Kofi Annan's challenge was uptaken. It was taken up by the International Convention on Intervention and State Sovereignty. And it was set up through the Canadian government, which at the end of 2001 issued a report entitled The Responsibility to Protect. The concept of this report was inspired by Francis Deng's idea that the state sovereignty as a responsibility, not just an inherent right. That a state had the responsibility to protect its own citizens from dehumanization, from genocide, from mass violence, but also at the same time, it's other states that have a reciprocal responsibility as well. That their responsibility is that if a country is not able to uphold that responsibility to its own citizens, that they must mobilize and protect those human beings from genocide.